Well, I am so delighted this morning that I have a good friend of mine from San Diego visiting today. And that's my friend Gail. She's sitting all the way in the back there. So welcome, Gail. Gail was my colleague when I was a high school teacher in San Diego. We worked together. Many of you know that I was a high school English teacher for 12 years. And one of the things that I enjoyed most when I taught high school English was teaching poetry. I loved reading poems aloud to the class and then going around the room and having the students tell their interpretation of the poem. And it was always so interesting to hear what the different minds thought, how they made meaning of the poem. But inevitably, there was always one student in the class who, after our time of sharing, would raise his or her hand and say, "Well, Mr. Sapienza, what is the real meaning of the poem?" He or she wanted an answer. They wanted the answer, and they wanted me to give them the answer. That's not education. I've shared with you before that the word education comes from a Latin word, educare, and it means to bring forth what is within you. That's what education is. It's an inside-out process. Unfortunately, for many of us, our education was an outside-in. The teacher told us information. We memorized it and spewed it back, and we got a gold star. But that's not education. It's inside out. It's going within for your answers. Now, we at Douglas UCC have as part of our church's mission statement a line that says, "We are a church that is more about the questions than the answers." I love that. Some people come to church, they want the answer. Well, we say we're more about the questions than the answers. When you walk in our church, you'll see a sign in the foyer, and it says, "We believe that there is more value in questioning than in absolutes." That is why the symbol of our church, the UCC, is a comma. That's what's on my stole here, a comma. It's not a period. For some churches, it's a period. God already said it 2,000 years ago. It's in the Bible, no further discussion. We're a comma. We say, no, God is still speaking. God is still working in us and through us. We are still making meaning. Now, some of us from Douglas UCC, last Saturday, we went to Mother's Trust Ashram, an interfaith center in Fenville, and we learned all about Buddhism. And one of the things we learned is that Buddhist teachers answer their students' questions with questions. They give riddles to their students. They're called koans, K-O-A-N-S, koans. They're paradoxes for students to meditate upon. So, for example, the Buddhist teacher may say, "What is the color of wind?" Or, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" Now, there's no answer to these koans. The reason the Buddhist teachers do this is because they know that the great spiritual questions don't have answers. Who is God? What happens to us after we die? What is the meaning of life? There is no answer. But the purpose of the spiritual life is to ponder and wonder at this mystery and to live in the questions together. Jesus was one of the great spiritual teachers of all time. And notice what his teaching technique was. It wasn't koans, it was parables. Jesus taught in parables. Parables don't give you answers. Parables ask questions for you to contemplate and meditate upon and seek the answer within. Parables are fictional stories. The stories Jesus was telling, they were fiction, not true. which is why it's so interesting to me that people take the Bible literally, because Jesus wasn't telling literal stories. He was telling fictional stories. But although the stories weren't true, they speak to great spiritual truths. Now, John Dominic Crossan is one of the leading voices in the progressive Christian movement, which our church is a part of. And he wrote a wonderful book, which I encourage you to read, which is called The Power of Parables. And he says in it that the purpose of the parable is to get us to discuss and debate, to ponder and wonder, to probe and question, and above all else, to make us practice the gift of human spirit, which is known as thinking. What a concept, thinking in religion. Most churches don't want you to think. They don't want you to question. They want to say, there's the answer. It's in the Bible. Go home, memorize it. Jesus didn't want you to do that. Jesus taught in parables because Jesus wanted you to think, to go within for your answer, to make meaning of it. That's the purpose of the spiritual life. Jesus and all the great philosophers, thinkers, spiritual teachers throughout history, they've all told us that there is this higher level of awareness. To take the Bible literally is the lowest level of meaning. It's the lowest comprehension. The spiritual teachers want us to lift up our minds, to go to this higher place of consciousness, this higher realm. And Jesus referred to this higher realm as the kingdom of heaven. And he said, this kingdom of heaven, this higher realm of awareness, is within you. You don't need to go and get it from somewhere. You don't need to find some guru. It's already within you. You have access to it here and now. And so all of Jesus' parables, every single one of them, is about gaining access to this kingdom of heaven that is within you here and now. And so today's parable, the parable of the sower, is probably one of Jesus' most famous parables. It appears in all of the synoptic gospels, and it even appears in the Gospel of Thomas, which is one of the Gnostic gospels that wasn't included in the Bible. So the reason it appears so much is because it's important. This parable speaks to one of the greatest spiritual principles, which is the principle of sowing and reaping. So let's look at this parable together from the metaphysical perspective in which Jesus wanted us to look at it. Once again, as Mike read for us, as I read for us, but Mike read for us too in the words of integration, that there's a sower sowing seed, scattering it everywhere, which, if you think about it, is a pretty bad farmer if you're just throwing your seeds everywhere. But the seeds being scattered everywhere, some of it falls on the road and birds come and eat it. Some of it falls on rocky soil. So there's more rocks than soil, and it doesn't really take root, and so it dies. And then other seed falls among thorns and gets choked. But it's the seed that falls on good soil that produces abundantly, 100-fold. What did Jesus mean by this symbolically? Well, again, I don't have your answer, but we're exploring the question together. So let's look at it symbolically. What does a seed represent? Well, a seed represents potential. Think about it. A tiny, tiny little seed has within it this amazing, mysterious thing that it can become a huge tree that will produce fruit for many years. It's incredible if you think about it. Well, Jesus is saying, you too have that potential within you, that potential for greatness, that potential for abundance. It's within you. And notice in Jesus' story, it's not really about the seed. It's more about where the seed lands. Because the seed is the same. It's all the same seed. God loves wastefully, spreading seed everywhere. But it's about the soil. So my question for you this morning is, how's your soil? Are you tending to your inner garden, to the garden of your mind? If your inner garden, the soil of your mind, is full of weeds, full of negativity and fear and worry and anxiety, nothing good is going to grow among it. It's going to be choked and die. If your inner garden is full of rocks, things that are in the way, old resentments, past hurts that you're still holding on to, negative thinking, our purpose of the spiritual life is to till the soil, to tend to our garden. That's what the spiritual practice is. It's to pull out those weeds and remove those rocks, to break up the soil. You know, many people who are religious, their soil is so hard-pressed, it will not be broken up. No, this is it. I cannot move from this position. Don't break me up. The purpose of the spiritual life is to be broken up so that we can let go of what no longer serves us, so that we can prepare the soil for new thoughts to take root and to grow. Now, in the weekly newsletter I send out on Fridays, the epistle we call it, I had a quote from the 13th century Christian mystic whose name was Meister Eckhart. And Meister Eckhart said, "We have the seed of God within us, just as pear seeds grow pear trees and hazel seeds grow hazel trees. God's seeds grow into God." He wrote that in the 13th century. The God seed, God's DNA, is within you. And your purpose for being, the purpose of being here, is for you to become like God, to grow into your godness. That's the purpose of the spiritual path. Or as Jesus said, to make manifest the kingdom of heaven here on earth. The seed is within you. Make it manifest. And Jesus gave us the instructions for how to do that. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard the expression that says, your mind is a garden. Your thoughts are seeds. You can grow flowers or you can grow weeds. The choice is yours. The Buddha said something very similar. He said, your heart is a garden. You can water seeds of compassion or seeds of fear. You can water seeds of resentment or you can water seeds of love. So which seeds are you watering? That's what he asked. You are the tiller of your soil. You're the master gardener of your life. You're the landscaper of your life. You get to choose. Now, the contemporary Buddhist teacher and monk, his name is Thich Nhat Hanh. Some of you read some of his books. Thich Nhat Hanh has a quote about seeds, and he says, in our consciousness, there are many negative seeds, and there are also many positive seeds. The practice is to avoid watering the negative seeds and to identify and water the positive seeds each and every day. That's the purpose of the spiritual practice, is so that we water the positive seeds and not the negative ones. And Marianne Williamson says, thought is the cause and experience is the effect. So if you don't like the effects in your life, you have to change the nature of your thinking. Cause and effect. If you're thinking thoughts of worry, if you're watering those seeds of fear and lack, guess what's going to be made manifest in your life? Worry, fear, and lack, because that's what you're watering. It's why the Apostle Paul told the early Christians, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." That's how we transform our lives, and that's what the parable of the sower teaches us. Is it says, take good care of this soil so that you can nurture the seed within you. Till that soil, tend to your garden. And how do we do that? Through spiritual practices, prayer, meditation, mindfulness practices. But as I told you last Sunday, that takes great discipline. And most people don't want to do that much work. It's too hard. It's why Jesus said, and it's what we sang in our opening hymn today, Jesus said, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few." Most of us don't want to do that much work. We don't want to get our hands dirty. We don't want to do all of that gardening and tending. It's too much. But if you want a more positive life, a more peaceful life, a more joyous life, if you want to grow and develop that God seed within you, you must discipline yourself. And so I encourage you again this week to find time each day for spiritual discipline so that you can tend to that inner garden, tend to your inner soil, remove the weeds, remove the rocks, and prepare the soil so that it's open and receptive to new thoughts and new growth. And I'd like to end my talk today with the words by the author Irvin Seal from his book, Learn to Live, the Meaning of the Parables, which we heard about in our words of integration this morning. Let us look to our soil. Let us develop the soil, and the seeds which are in it will sprout and grow. Cultivate a healthy and vibrant expectancy. Condition your mind with thoughts of the highest truths. Then, having made your soil ready, when the word of God falls upon your soil, it will spring up and bear fruit, some 30-fold, some 60, and some 100-fold. Namaste.